Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources, distill their essence, and really try to unearth the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
Hmm.
Today, we're plunging into Kabbalah,
A big topic.
a huge one. And, this isn't just some dusky, abstract concept from ancient texts.
Not at all.
It's actually a living, evolving system of thought that has captivated minds for centuries.
That's right. Still does.
So our mission today, really based on the material we've gathered, is to try and unravel its complexities, from its hidden origins all the way to its surprising modern manifestations,
Hmm.
and maybe grasp why it continues to resonate with so many people.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Where do we start?
So maybe right at the very root. What is Kabbalah? I mean, the name itself seems to offer a profound clue, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah.
The Hebrew word Kabbalah, it comes from the root, kof bait lamet, right? Meaning to receive or to accept.
Exactly. And it's usually translated as tradition or maybe that which is received.
Right, that which is received.
And that's a crucial starting point because embedded right there in that name is a fundamental theological claim.
Okay.
Kabbalah is basically asserting it's not, a philosophy just created by human reason,
Uh-huh.
but that it's a primordial kind of esoteric wisdom, a divine truth, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
that was orally transmitted through what they call an unbroken chain,
Yeah.
passed down by patriarchs, prophets, sages.
An unbroken chain.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's considered the Nystar, which means the hidden, the inner mystical dimension of Judaism.
Okay, the hidden part.
Right. And this inner wisdom complements the nigleh, that's the revealed or outer dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Things like halakha, Jewish law, the everyday practices, the rituals that guide Jewish life.
So it's like an inside and an outside.
Precisely. And Kabbalists truly believe their teachings unlock the spiritual secrets hidden within the Hebrew Bible and rabbinic literature.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as, well, nothing less than the soul of the Torah.
It's the soul of the Torah. That's powerful. But what's really fascinating and maybe a bit confusing is that while Kabbalah presents itself as this incredibly ancient, unbroken tradition, academic historical analysis shows its actual textual, systematic form really emerged much later,
Right, yeah.
like 12th and 13th centuries, mainly southern France and Spain. So there's a definite tension there.
Oh, a profound tension, absolutely. And it really highlights a very strategic claim to authority.
Strategic how?
Well, by defining itself as a reception of ancient wisdom, Kabbalah essentially claimed an antiquity,
Mm.
an authority that could rival, maybe even predate, rabbinic Judaism itself.
Ah, okay. So it's setting itself up as older, deeper.
Exactly. It strategically positioned itself as recovering the primordial core of Judaism, and this allowed it to challenge the intellectual dominance of Maimonidean rationalism.
It was huge at the time.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah.
Maimonides was all about reason. Kabbalah countered by asserting a deeper, more ancient, maybe more direct form of divine knowledge.
Yeah.
It was a really clever way to legitimize its, frankly, revolutionary ideas.
That is a remarkable strategy. Okay, so moving from the name and the claim, let's turn to how Kabbalah actually conceives of God and the universe. This is where it gets, well, really profound, right?
It does. Deep waters here.
Hmm.
At the very, very peak of Kabbalistic thought is the concept of Ein Sof,
Ein Sof.
meaning without end or the infinite. This is God in his absolute purest, undifferentiated essence, like before any self-manifestation.
Before anything happens.
Pretty much. It's utterly unknowable, beyond all description. You can only really talk about it through negation, what it is not. It's the root of all roots. Sometimes it's thought of as or Ein Sof, the infinite light that fills absolutely everything before creation even begins.
Okay, so if God is this absolute infinite Ein Sof, filling everything, how can a finite world like ours even exist?
That's the question.
Yeah. How does an infinite, unchanging God interact with our, constantly changing world without somehow compromising his own transcendent nature? It feels like a massive paradox.
It is. That's precisely the central paradox, transcendence versus immanence, that Ein Sof is meant to address.
Okay.
So Ein Sof safeguards God's absolute transcendence. He remains pure, untouched by the finite realm. But like you said, that creates a problem.
Yeah.
How do you relate to a God who's totally distant?
Right.
Kabbalah resolves this through the Sefirot, the divine emanations.
Ah, the Sefirot. I've heard of those.
They act as this necessary bridge. They kind of filter the infinite energy of Ein Sof so that the finite world can actually receive it without being overwhelmed.
Like stepping down the voltage.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. And this leads to a really complex vision. It's often called panentheistic. The world isn't God, but God is infinitely more than the world. God encompasses everything.
Okay, so the Sefirot are this crucial bridge, 10 fundamental emanations, channels of divine energy, sometimes called the letters or building blocks of creation.
Exactly. Building blocks is a good way to think of it. And they're usually visually arranged in the earth. Ad touchayim, the tree of life.
The tree of life. Can you
Yeah.
help us picture that? What's its core structure?
Sure. And it's important to remember, the tree of life isn't just like a static diagram.
Right.
It's seen as a dynamic, almost holographic model of all reality. So the 10 Sefirot are typically arranged in 3 vertical pillars.
3 pillars.
Yeah, the right pillar of mercy, the left pillar of severity, and the central pillar of equilibrium. This structure really highlights the interplay of opposing forces, that need to be balanced for the divine energy to flow properly.
Mercy, severity, equilibrium.
And each Sephirah also corresponds to, well, tons of things. Divine names, archangels, parts of the human soul, colors, planets. It forms this vast web of meaning.
Wow.
And then there are 22 paths connecting the Sefirot. These are linked to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. They represent stages of consciousness, the flow of divine energy between the emanations.
So it's much more than just a map then. It sounds like Kabbalah works on this principle of correspondence.
Exactly. Correspondence is key. The idea is that the same Sephirotic structure underlies God, the cosmos, and the human soul. Macrocosm and microcosm.
They mirror each other.
They mirror each other. And this structural identity is the absolute foundation for a really radical concept, theurgy.
Theurgy. Okay, what's the implication of that? It sounds big.
It is big. Theurgy is the belief that human actions, specifically performing mitzvot, the religious commandments, can directly affect the divine realms.
Directly affect God.
Well, the divine realms.
Yeah.
Restore balance, draw down divine energy. It means humanity isn't just a passive recipient of divine grace. We're active participants in maintaining, even perfecting, the cosmic order.
So my actions, like my everyday conscious acts, could potentially have a ripple effect way up in the spiritual cosmos.
That's the idea, yeah.
Does that suggest a kind of, I don't know, radical everyday heroism? It means religious life isn't just about obedience anymore.
Exactly. It transforms Jewish religious life from, simply following the law into this indispensable, cosmically significant mission. Your actions become vital to the divine order itself.
That idea, human actions impacting the divine, that's truly groundbreaking. But how did this whole intricate system, with its claims of ancient origin, actually develop and, transform through Jewish history?
Right. Well, while the formal, systematic Kabbalah emerged in the medieval period, it definitely drew on much older roots.
Like what?
Early Jewish mysticism.
Yeah.
For instance, the Merkabah and ha-Kelim literatures.
Uh-huh.
This is like 2nd to 10th century CE. They focused on these ecstatic, visionary journeys, a sense to behold the divine throne or chariot, very intense stuff.
Okay.
Then came the Sefirot, the book of creation, maybe somewhere between the 2nd and 6th centuries. This text is crucial because it's the first one we know of that uses the term Sephirot in a cosmological sense. It describes the universe being created through 32 paths.
The 32 paths.
Yeah, the 10 Sephirot plus the 22 Hebrew letters.
And that really set the stage for Kabbalah as we kind of know it today.
Right. It certainly paved the way. Kabbalah proper first seems to appear in Provence, southern France, late 12th century. You get the Sefer HaBahir, the Book of Brightness.
Oh,
Right. This text developed the Sephirotic system into that familiar tree image we talked about. And it also introduced the concept of Gilgul, or reincarnation, into Jewish mysticism.
Reincarnation. Okay. Didn't see that coming yet.
Yeah, it becomes important later. But the really monumental achievement came in 13th century Spain. The Sefer HaZohar, the Book of Splendor.
A Zohar, that's the big one.
That's the cornerstone. It's this extensive, incredibly complex commentary on the Torah. It became the foundational, almost sacred, Kabbalistic text.
Now, there's a huge authorship controversy surrounding the Zohar, isn't there?
Oh yeah, major debate.
Traditionally, it's attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who lived way back in the 2nd century.
Right, a famous Talmudic sage.
But modern scholarship pretty much points to Moses de Leon, who lived in the 13th century.
Correct.
So if scholarship says 13th century, how do traditional Kabbalists handle that? Why was that ancient attribution so significant anyway?
That's a really pivotal question. The traditional view isn't necessarily that Moses de Leon wrote it, but that he maybe found it or revealed it or transcribed this hidden ancient text.
Ah, preserving the ancient origin idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From an academic perspective, though, attributing it to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a profoundly strategic move.
Okay.
By linking the Zohar to this ancient, revered sage, Moses Leon was basically saying, look, Kabbalah is the true primordial oral Torah. It's a secret tradition passed down all the way from Moses at Sinai.
So older and more authentic than even the Talmudic tradition, maybe, or at least the rationalist interpretations.
Precisely. It asserted it predated and superseded the inquiries of the rationalist philosophers like Maimonides. This was absolutely central to its fight for legitimacy and its ability to absorb philosophical ideas while still presenting itself as this pure internal Jewish revelation.
Okay, fascinating strategy. Let's fast forward a bit to the 16th century, a really pivotal and tragic moment, the Spanish expulsion in 1492.
Huge trauma, yeah.
And this trauma seems to have led to a new center for Kabbalah in Sefirot, this small town in the Galilee.
That's right. Safes became a hub.
And two features really stand out there, transforming the tradition yet again.
Absolutely. First, you have Rabbi Moses Cordovero, known as the Ramak. He produced the first really great systematization of Kabbalistic thought. His major work is Pardes Ramomim, Orchard of Pomegranates.
Systematization. Bringing order.
Exactly. He was brilliant, encyclopedic. He organized centuries of earlier Kabbalistic traditions into a coherent whole. Very scholastic.
Okay. And the second figure?
The second figure is Rabbi Isaac Luria, universally known as the Ari, the Lion. He arrived in Sefed shortly before Cordovero actually passed away, and in just 2 years of teaching, only 2 years before his own untimely death.
Wow, only 2 years.
Just 2 years. Luria introduced this completely revolutionary new mythological system. It's known as Lurianic Kabbalah, and it was mostly recorded by his chief disciple, Rabbi Chaim Vital.
So that's a really profound shift then from Cordovero's more, you said, scholastic theology to Luria's system, which sounds much more dynamic, psychological, even messianic.
Absolutely. It was a paradigm shift.
What made Luria's system so incredibly impactful, especially coming after such a massive trauma like the expulsion?
Well, Luria's system provided this incredibly powerful theological framework for understanding that trauma.
How so?
It connected the Jewish people's earthly suffering, their exile, their dislocation, to a parallel cosmic drama happening within the Godhead itself.
Wow.
The exile of the Jewish people was seen as mirroring, or being part of, the exile of God's own presence in the world, the Shekinah.
So personal suffering becomes cosmic suffering.
Exactly. And this resonance explained the suffering, but crucially, it also offered a meaningful path to overcome it through active human participation in cosmic redemption, or Tikkun.
Tikkun Olam.
Right. Lurianic Kabbalah spread like wildfire and became the dominant mystical theology because it gave cosmic meaning to very real, very painful earthly experiences, and importantly, gave people a sense of agency, a path to repair the brokenness.
And from those, presumably elite circles in Sefed, studying these deep mysteries, Kabbalah eventually moves into becoming a truly popular movement with the rise of Hasidism in the 18th century.
That's another huge leap, yeah.
That seems like a massive jump for a tradition that was once so secret.
Yeah.
How did Hasidism manage to popularize something so complex, so esoteric, without just watering it down completely?
That's a great question. The founder of Hasidism was Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer, known as the Baal Shem Tov, or the Bashit.
The Baal Shem Tov.
Right. Hasidism absolutely integrated Lurianic Kabbalah, but it radically adapted it for a much broader popular audience. The emphasis shifted.
Shifted how?
It shifted away from these highly complex, esoteric meditative practices towards achieving direct, personal, mystical experience, what they call deveket.
Deveket. Cleaving, right?
Exactly. Cleaving or clinging to God.
Hmm.
And the key was, you could achieve this in the midst of everyday life.
Not just locked away studying.
Right. This essentially democratized the path to spiritual elevation. Those really esoteric Lurianic tasks, like raising the fallen sparks, could now, according to Hasidism, be achieved through simple, heartfelt acts.
Like what?
Like eating a meal with intention and gratitude, singing a simple melody with joy, praying with intense fervor and enthusiasm. They called it hitlahavet.
So bringing the mystical down to earth.
Very much so, making the transcendent accessible in the immanent.
But this must have ruffled some feathers. Was it met with opposition?
Oh, absolutely. Fierce opposition from the traditional rabbinic establishment, who became known as the Mitnagdim, literally those who are opposed.
The Mitnagdim.
Led by the great scholar Rabbi Elijah of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon. They really feared the emotionalism of Hasidism, the emphasis on charismatic leaders, the Rebs, and especially after the disaster of the Shabbatai Zvi Messianic movement in the previous century.
Which we'll get to.
Right. They were deeply worried about any potential deviation from rigorous Talmudic scholarship and established norms. They saw Hasidism as potentially dangerous,
But despite the opposition.
Despite the fierce opposition, Hasidism ultimately became a major, enduring force within Orthodox Judaism. It succeeded in embedding once highly esoteric Kabbalistic ideas and practices into popular religious life, bringing this deep, mystical dimension to the everyday experience of many Jews.
Okay, this brings us perfectly to delving deeper into that Lurianic mythos, which, as you said, became so dominant. It's often described as this three-stage cosmic drama, right? Tzimtzum, Shevirat, ha-Kelim, and Tikkun Olam.
Exactly, that's the core narrative. And maybe Luria's most radical, most startling innovation is the first step. Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum, meaning contraction or withdrawal.
Correct. The problem Luria was tackling was fundamental. If Ein Sof, the infinite divine being, fills all reality, how can there possibly be any space for a finite world to exist that isn't just God?
Right. Where does the not God part come from?
Exactly. His incredibly audacious solution was that the very first act of creation wasn't an outpouring, but a holding back, a divine self-limitation.
God withdrew.
Yes. Ein Sof withdrew, or contracted its infinite light from a central point, creating a kind of conceptual vacant space. It's called the Tehiru. And creation then begins within this sphere of divine absence.
Hold on. So the very beginning of everything is a divine absence, an emptiness.
That's the radical idea.
That means emptiness isn't just a lack, it's actually the prerequisite for anything else to exist. How does that idea, divine withdrawal at the dawn of creation, how does that change how we think about space or existence?
It's completely transformative. It suggests that existence itself is predicated on divine concealment, on God holding back, and the implications are staggering. Well, it means the potential for evil, for chaos, for separation. It arises right here from this initial vacuum. Exile in this model isn't just a historical accident that happened to the Jews later. It's embedded into the very fabric of being. It's a cosmic precondition for existence itself.
Wow. Okay, so that's the Tzimtzum, the withdrawal. What happens next in this cosmic drama?
So after the Tzimtzum creates this vacant space, a single ray or line, kav, of divine light streams back into the void. This light begins to form the Sefirot, arranging them in the configuration of Adam Kadmon.
Adam Kadmon, okay.
Then lights emanate from Adam Kadmon into specific vessels, Kelim, designed to contain them. But here comes the catastrophe.
Stage 2.
Stage 2, Shevirat ha-Kelim, the shattering of the vessels. According to the myth, the lower 7 vessels were simply too weak, too brittle to contain the intense, powerful divine light pouring into them, and they shattered.
They broke under the pressure.
Exactly.
And what were the consequences of that shattering? For our world, I mean.
Profound consequences. The broken shards of these vessels tumbled down into the primordial space, and crucially, divine sparks of holiness, Netzotzot, which were part of the light, became trapped, imprisoned within these broken shards.
Trapped sparks.
And these shards, now mixed with the entrapped sparks, but devoid of their original organizing light and structure, became the Sitra Atra, the other side, the realms of evil, impurity, imbalance. They're often called kelipot.
Kelipot, husks or shells.
Exactly. Husks or shells that conceal the trapped sparks of holiness within them. This myth provides this incredibly powerful explanation for why the world is so imperfect, so chaotic, full of suffering and evil.
So it wasn't created perfect and then fell?
Not exactly. In this Lurianic view, the universe isn't a perfect creation that somehow went wrong later. It's actually the consequence of a primordial flaw, a kind of accident, right at the heart of the creation process itself. The world, you could say, is born broken.
Born broken. That's quite a concept. And this leads us directly then to humanity's purpose, right? The third stage, Tikkun Olam.
Precisely. If the world is born broken because of the shattering, then the fundamental purpose of existence, and specifically of human existence, is Tikkun Olam.
Which means repair or restoration of the world.
Repair, rectification, restoration. That's humanity's primary cosmic task. And the central mechanism for achieving this tikkun is the scrupulous performance of the mitzvot.
The 613 commandments of the Torah.
Yes, but, and this is crucial, performed with the proper mystical intention, the proper kavanah.
Kavanah, that intention again.
Right. Each time a person performs a mitzvah with the right kavanah, they mystically locate one of those fallen sparks of holiness, separated from its impure kelipa, its husk, and raise it back up to its divine source.
So you're literally rescuing sparks of light.
That's the mystical understanding, yes. Yeah. And this process gradually purifies the world, weakens the power of the Sitra Achra, rebuilds the divine structure, the Partsufim or divine faces or configurations, and ultimately paves the way for the final messianic redemption.
So humanity isn't just, following rules because God said so. We're actively participating in healing the cosmos.
Exactly. It makes our everyday actions incredibly powerful. Humanity becomes an active, indispensable partner with God in the ongoing process of creation and redemption. We're healing not only the world, but in a metaphorical sense, healing the brokenness within the Godhead itself, healing God, so to speak.
That's an incredibly empowering and maybe daunting perspective, the idea that your actions have cosmic weight.
It is. That's the core empowering message of Lurianic Kabbalah. Your life, your choices, your actions truly matter on a cosmic scale.
Okay, now let's transition. We've talked about the big picture, the cosmos, God. Let's zoom in from that macrocosm to the human microcosm, the soul itself. How does Kabbalah understand the soul?
Right. Well, fundamentally in Kabbalistic thought, the human soul is seen as a direct spark of the divine essence itself. It's called the Chelik Eloka Mimal, a part of God from above.
A part of God, living within us.
In essence, yes. There's this intrinsic, unbreakable bond between the human soul and the divine. Now, a really key concept, especially developed in Chabad Hasidism, based on earlier ideas, is the existence of two distinct souls within every person.
Two souls.
Two souls. There's the Nefesh HaBehemet, the animal soul. This is linked to our physical nature, our bodily cravings, our natural instincts, the ego-driven self.
Okay, the more worldly part.
Right. And then there's the Nefesh Halakit, the godly soul. This is understood as a pure extension of the divine, whose deepest yearning is to nullify its own ego, fulfill the divine will, and reconnect with the eternal, with God.
So they're in conflict.
Constantly. Human life, from this perspective, is basically a perpetual battlefield between these two souls, between the pull towards the material and the pull towards the spiritual. And this inner conflict is seen as the very engine of spiritual growth and self-mastery.
And beyond these two basic souls, is the soul understood to have, deeper layers, like peeling an onion?
Yes, exactly like that. While the two-soul model describes the core dynamic of conflict, the soul is also understood to have 5 hierarchical levels or dimensions of consciousness. They range from the most basic life force connected to the body up to the most transcendent levels of divine apprehension.
What are they, briefly?
Briefly, you have Nefesh, the vital force linked to the body and basic drives. Then Ruach, associated with emotions and morality. Then Neshama, often seen as the higher intellect, the part that can grasp divine mysteries. And then even higher, Chaya, the living essence, linked to intuitive cognition. And finally, Yechida, the unique essence, representing the soul's ultimate intrinsic unity with God's singular essence.
Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Sida. Wow, okay, complex.
It is. It's a very detailed map of the inner world.
And Kabbalah also, you mentioned earlier, developed this ancient Jewish concept of reincarnation, Gilgul Neshamat. How does that fit into this picture of the soul's journey in this cosmic repair work, Tikkun Olam?
It fits in perfectly, really. The idea of Gilgul, or transmigration of souls, is that souls travel through multiple lifetimes.
Why?
For purification, for rectification, and crucially, to complete their unique mission in the world related to Tikkun Olam. Each soul, according to this view, has a specific set of fallen sparks that it is uniquely tasked with finding and elevating.
My personal spark.
Your personal sparks, yeah. If a soul doesn't complete its mission in one lifetime, maybe it succumbs too much to the animal soul, or doesn't perform the necessary mitzvot with Kavanaugh, it returns in another body, another lifetime, to get another chance.
So it's a framework for understanding divine justice, maybe, and eventual perfection.
Exactly. It allows for eventual perfection for every soul over a long arc of spiritual evolution, and it explains suffering and challenges as opportunities for this soul rectification.
So it's clear Kabbalah isn't just abstract theory or myth. It's very much about dedicated practice, isn't it?
Absolutely. Practice is central, and a foundational concept for practice is Kavanaugh. We keep coming back to that.
Intention, devotional focus.
Right. This deep mindfulness is considered absolutely necessary to activate the theurgic potential. We talked about the power of mitzvot and prayer to affect the upper worlds. Without the proper Kavanaugh, a ritual act is seen as just a body without a soul, an empty shell.
But with Kavanaugh...
With Kavanaugh, it becomes a cosmic event. It helps harmonize the supernal worlds, it draws down divine energy, and it raises those fallen sparks. Beyond just having general Kavanaugh in all mitzvot, Kabbalah also developed very specific meditative practices aimed at achieving devikut.
That cleaving or mystical union with God?
Precisely. And these techniques could include things like visualization, mentally picturing sacred symbols, like the Sefirot arranged in certain ways, or the letters of divine names.
Right.
Also chanting or mantra-like repetition of divine names, like the four-letter name YHVH, or specific Hebrew phrases or verses, and sometimes specific breath control techniques to calm the mind and body and prepare for deeper states of consciousness.
And then there are the Yichudim, you mentioned those. They sound incredibly complex, maybe even intense.
They are Yichudim, which means unifications, are really the pinnacle of meditative practice, especially in the later Lurianic school. You could almost think of Yichudim as a kind of spiritual technology or even spiritual coding.
Coding. How so?
Well, Kabbalists believed that the Hebrew letters weren't just symbols for sounds. They were the actual spiritual building blocks, the DNA of creation itself.
Okay.
So by mentally combining, permuting, and manipulating various divine names associated with different Sefirot or divine aspects, essentially, manipulating these divine building blocks in a highly focused, almost mathematical way, a skilled practitioner believed they could actively enact unifications between different divine aspects.
Like uniting masculine and feminine energies in the Godhead.
Exactly. Uniting aspects like the masculine and feminine parts. These are complex configurations of the Sefirot that represent how God interacts with the world. The goal was always to promote harmony in the upper worlds, overcome the divisions caused by the shattering, and draw down divine blessing and influx into this world.
That sounds potent.
Immensely potent. Which is precisely why these practices were considered potentially dangerous if done improperly or by someone unprepared. They were traditionally reserved only for the most advanced, pious, and psychologically stable initiates. It wasn't for beginners.
Right. It's clear Kabbalah has this incredibly rich inner life, this deep history, but it also seems to have a history that's full of tension, controversy,
Yeah,
especially as it journeyed into and through the modern world.
absolutely. Controversy has been its companion almost from the start. Even setting aside the philosophical debates, the study of Kabbalah itself was historically restricted.
You mentioned that. Only married men over 40 accomplished scholars.
Right. Those were the traditional safeguards, precisely because the material was seen as so powerful and potentially destabilizing if misunderstood or misused, and there were always pointed critiques.
Like what?
Well, theological critiques, accusations, for example, that the Ten Sefirot compromised pure monotheism by introducing multiplicity into the Godhead, or that the concept of the Sitra Atra, the other side, smacked of Gnostic dualism, positing a power opposing God.
Okay, theological challenge.
And historical challenges, too. The authority of its foundational text, the Zohar, was questioned. Scholars like Leon Modena back in the 17th century argued quite forcefully that it wasn't an ancient text from Shimon Bar Yochai, but a medieval forgery by Moses de Leon. That strikes at its core claim of antiquity.
Right. Undermining its authority.
Exactly. And then, perhaps most damagingly in practical terms, was the disastrous Shabbatai Zvi messianic movement in the mid-17th century.
Ah, yes, you mentioned him. That must have been a critical, maybe traumatic moment for how Kabbalah was viewed afterwards.
It absolutely was. Shabbatai Zvi was this incredibly charismatic mystic, deeply immersed in Lurianic Kabbalah. He declared himself the Messiah.
And people believed him.
Masses of people across the entire Jewish world believed him. It was a frenzy. He used Lurianic concepts like the need for the Messiah to descend into the realms of the Kelopot to rescue sparks, to justify some of his strange actions.
Okay.
But then, under pressure from the Ottoman Sultan, he converted to Islam.
He converted the Messiah.
He converted. It was a catastrophic disillusionment. It traumatized the Jewish world for generations and deeply implicated Kabbalah, especially Lurianic Kabbalah, in leading potentially pious people into heresy and apostasy.
So it confirmed the establishment's worst fears?
It absolutely reinforced rabbinic suspicion and caution regarding mysticism. And that suspicion later fueled the Mitnagdim's fierce opposition to Hasidism, which they saw as potentially repeating the same errors. So this long, contentious history really reflects a kind of sustained struggle for the very soul of Judaism itself, between rationalism and mysticism, law and experience, caution and fervor.
It's fascinating, then, how a particular movement's stance on Kabbalah can almost serve as a litmus test, a clear indicator of its core theological principles and boundaries. How has this actually played out in the various modern Jewish denominations we see today?
It's a great lens, actually. Within Orthodox Judaism, generally speaking, there's an acceptance of Kabbalah's authenticity, but the approach varies.
How?
Hasidic movements, like Chabad or Breslov, make Kabbalah absolutely central. They present its ideas, often in simplified forms, as accessible and essential for a vibrant spiritual life. It informs their prayer, their study, their daily practice.
So front and center for Hasidim.
Very much so. But in non-Hasidic Orthodox circles, sometimes called yeshivish or litvish, they tend to be more cautious. While accepting its validity, the primary emphasis is overwhelmingly on Talmudic study. Kabbalah might be seen as a higher level of study reserved for an intellectual or spiritual elite, not necessarily for everyone.
More restricted again.
More restricted in practice, yes. And then you have Sephardic and Mizrachi Orthodox communities where, historically, Kabbalistic ideas and practices were often more organically integrated into their liturgy, customs, and piety than in Ashkenazi non-Hasidic communities.
Okay, so diversity even within Orthodoxy. What about the non-Orthodox movements? Reform.
Right. Reform Judaism, which was really born out of the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and rationalism, historically rejected Kabbalah quite strongly. It was seen as irrational, superstitious, incompatible with modernity.
So a clear no initially.
The very clear no.
Yeah.
However, starting in the late 20th, early 21st century, there's been a really significant shift, driven partly by a hunger for spirituality that rationalism alone didn't satisfy.
A revival of interest.
A definite revival. Many Reform rabbis and thinkers now teach Kabbalistic concepts. And certain rituals that actually originated in Kabbalistic circles, like the Kabbalat Shabbat service welcoming the Sabbath, or the Tu B'Shvat Seder celebrating the New Year of the Trees, have become pretty standard in Reform congregations.
Interesting turnaround. What about conservative Judaism, the middle path?
Conservative Judaism, true to its middle path approach, has been somewhat ambivalent. There were major figures like the great Talmud scholar Rabbi Saul Lieberman, who famously dismissed Kabbalah as nonsense.
Oh.
Yeah. But on the other hand, the immense influence of thinkers like Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who deeply valued piety, experience, and the Hasidic tradition, created space for a more positive, though modern and non-fundamentalist, engagement with Kabbalah.
So how is it viewed now, generally?
Generally today, it's often viewed within conservative Judaism as a rich spiritual and ethical resource, offering profound insights, but not necessarily as binding theology in a literal sense. It's valued for its poetry and depth, perhaps more than its metaphysical claims.
Okay. And that brings us then to the most recent and maybe the most dramatic transformation of Kabbalah. It's a universalist turn in the contemporary age.
This is where things get really interesting and highly controversial. We see the emergence of movements like the Kabbalah Center, founded by Philip Berg.
Famous for the red strings?
Infamous, some would say. Yes, the red strings. And also B'nai Baruch, founded by Michael Laitman. Both of these groups actually trace their lineage back to a respected 20th century Kabbalist, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag.
Okay, so there's a link to tradition.
There's a claimed lineage, yes. But they represent a radical departure from traditional Kabbalah in several key ways.
How so?
First, they completely dismantle all those historical restrictions on who can study it. They actively market and teach Kabbalah to a massive global audience, including non-Jews, people with absolutely no background in Judaism or Hebrew, anyone really.
Universal access.
Universal access. Second, they significantly reframe what Kabbalah is. It's often presented not as the esoteric soul of rabbinic Judaism, deeply tied to Jewish law and observance, halakha, but as a kind of universal spiritual wisdom or even a science of reality.
A science.
Yeah, focusing on principles for achieving self-fulfillment, happiness, success, prosperity, often largely detached from the traditional requirements of Jewish observance.
And the commercialization.
Massive commercialization, selling books, courses, websites, those red string bracelets, even Kabbalah water. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise for some of these groups.
And this has obviously been met with, well, pushback.
Oh, fierce condemnation. From mainstream Orthodox rabbis across the spectrum, from academics specializing in Jewish mysticism, they widely denounce these popular movements as inauthentic, superficial, often exploitative. They're frequently labeled as cults or a kind of New Age mishmash that cherry-picks Kabbalistic terms but strips them of their context and depth.
So a battle over authenticity.
A huge battle. It's really a fascinating postmodern phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see Kabbalah being deconstructed, taken out of its very specific Jewish, religious, and cultural context, and then rebranded as a kind of globalized self-help phenomenon. The controversy really revolves around authenticity, commercialization, and the very definition of what constitutes religion versus spirituality in our contemporary secular age.
Yeah.
It's like that democratization we saw with Hasidism, but taken to what many traditional critics would see as a profane or at least highly problematic conclusion.
What an absolutely extraordinary journey for a mystical tradition, from, whispered secrets in elite circles
Right.
to a truly global and highly contested phenomenon.
It really is remarkable. And it seems defined by that central paradox we touched on earlier. It constantly claims to be the most ancient, intimate expression of Judaism's soul, this received tradition, while simultaneously demonstrating this astonishing capacity for radical innovation, reinterpretation, and adaptation to wildly different historical contexts.
And that tension, that ability to be both ancient and new, seems to be what's kept it so potent, so relevant from medieval Spain to, well, to Hollywood and the internet today.
I think that's exactly right. That dynamic tension is key to its survival and its enduring power.
And its enduring legacy, it seems, is truly profound. Regardless of how one feels about its modern manifestations, Kabbalah provides these incredibly sophisticated, deeply imaginative attempts to answer the most fundamental human questions.
Absolutely.
The nature of God, the meaning of creation, the reason for suffering, the path towards redemption. It really reveals humanity's enduring quest for deeper connection, for meaning, navigating that complex, often fraught relationship between established tradition and the innovations of mystical experience.
Well said.
This raises an important question. What stands out to you listening to this? How does this incredibly complex history, and especially that central Lurianic idea of Tikkun Olam, of cosmic repair, how does that resonate, if at all, with your own understanding of purpose, or maybe with the challenges we face in our world today?